Hello and a very sunny welcome from Portugal to Formula One fans everywhere. Ben Edwards and John Watson with Eurosport's extensive Grand Prix coverage once again, starting out with the first official qualifying session for round 13 of the FIA Formula One World Championship. Glorious weather, it's about 25 degrees C, a pleasant cool breeze, and a good turnout of fans from all over Europe, including many from the UK here today. And the first free practice session held from 9:30 this morning indicates that the usual battle between Williams and Benetton will be as fierce as ever, but perhaps with another one involved, and that could be McLaren.
And indeed, Mika Häkkinen, towards the end of the 1.5-hour session this morning, found himself quickest, and that's with the McLaren Mercedes-Benz MP410C, the latest spec version from McLaren. And Mika Häkkinen had a fresh set of tyres to do that time. I think he was probably the only person that used more than one set of tyres in that 1.5-hour session. But he ended up quickest, 1 minute 23.073.
Mika Häkkinen fastest in that free practice session. Damon Hill was second fastest, Michael Schumacher third, and David Coulthard fourth. So as you can see from that, most of the usual regular guys are up there. Gerhard Berger and Jean Alesi were then just behind. But some did have problems. David Coulthard, for example, only completing 9 laps. He had a hydraulic problem with the gearbox.
Well, David Coulthard has lost a lot of running time. He wasn't particularly happy about that. Not least of all because he's got a car handling problem as well. He's got oversteer, where I think the majority here today were complaining of understeer, and that is the predominant characteristic most people are suffering from. Now, as the track gets quicker and quicker, in other words, as the racing line goes down, more rubber around all these sinuous corners here in Estoril, then the front end grip picks up. But strange that David Coulthard had the opposite. It was his back end that was very wayward, and he's lost time, which he feels is a setback for this afternoon's qualification. The reason for that is that the Goodyear B compound tyre, that's the tyre that everybody has got here this weekend, is probably going to give of its best on the first flying lap. Beyond that, it will probably stabilise and may end up dropping off slightly. That's partly the nature of the circuit, that's partly the nature of that tyre compound. So for David Coulthard in particular, really trying testing conditions. The conditions themselves, of course, absolutely gorgeous, beautiful weather, 25 degrees, the breeze not too strong, not as strong as it was on Thursday. I would say just about ideal.
We're watching Massimiliano Papis first onto the circuit, the only driver onto the circuit, going through that new sequence that was introduced last year, and that, of course, due to all the safety changes that were made at many of the circuits during last season. Now, of course, the teams are much more used to it. This track is used extensively as a test circuit by the teams over the winter particularly, but also during the season itself. So Massimiliano Papis will be the first to cross the line and go on to a flying lap. Remember, Papis finished 7th last time out in Monza, was pit on that last lap by Jean-Christophe Bouillon in the Sauber.
And there was a very disappointed Footwear Car team. They thought they had 1 point in the bin, and a very valuable point that would have been, but Jean-Christophe Bouillon, and he's recently married, in fact. He, along with Marc Blundell, joined the marriage club last weekend. Marc Blundell, he did his bit in Essex, but Jean-Christophe Bouillon, somewhat more Bouillon in his choice of venue, went to Disneyland in Paris.
Well, indeed, so we have 2 new married couples here this weekend, but for Massimiliano Papis, first to start establishing our sector times. You can see the first bit there is just before that uphill, long sweeping left-hander called the Parabolica Interior.
Yes, and he short-shifted his gear change midway through the corner. You could hear that on the picture. And bearing in mind, as I mentioned a minute ago, your first lap, really, according to Goodyear and to teams who've been here over many years and know the circuit well, is you've got to get it done as soon as possible. But Papis, you see, really battling for grip. He's got oversteer in a lot of places, and you can see even there turning in to that S's just before they come onto this final long corner, picking up speed all the way through, and at just about after 71 laps makes your neck feel it isn't attached to your shoulders.
So Papis will give us our first indicator of the times, a 25.923. Let's just see how that compared with what he did this morning, a 25.737, so just a couple of tenths slower.
So Papis probably more like a number of the less experienced drivers, and also in the teams that are not necessarily consistently at the front, may well find that that first lap at speed was a confidence-building lap. So we look to see whether he can improve on his out lap, and he's got ahead of him Jean-Denis Delatraz, a newcomer here this season, and there Delatraz stays in the left, but to some extent Max Papis is a little bit confused, but he's already over 0.3 of a second faster than his first flying lap. Very wide in the mid and exit part of that interior parabolica, but we wait to see at the second segment time, has he maintained that gap? Maybe he's extended it.
We just had a quick glance at Jean-Denis Delatraz there, the Swiss driver. It'll be his second Grand Prix this weekend in his career. He made his debut for La Rousse at the end of last year in the Australian Grand Prix, but he's taken over from Giovanni Lavaggi in the second Pacific. But let's return to Papis, and he has improved, as you can see, on that second sector time. And Max Papis now just has the long sweeping right-hander on to start-finish straight for him to see if he can improve on his 1 minute 25.923. The only one to have set a time so far. Papis does slightly improve on his previous best. Qualifying here from Estoril, we had a quick glimpse of the McLaren Mercedes of Mika Häkkinen, who set the fastest time in the free practice this morning. But so far, it's Massimiliano Papis who set the fastest time in this first official session. Jean-Denis Delatraz has completed one lap, and Mika Salo is now out on the circuit.
And I would expect to see Mika Salo elevate himself up to being quickest. But in fact, I say that because I know just how fine a driver Mika Salo is, but in fact, Max Papis this morning was the quicker of these two drivers, indicating that the footwork hard, which we saw very oversteery at the beginning of this program, is probably the quicker of the two cars here presently. So Mika Salo, and again a stranger to this circuit, he didn't drive in Formula 3000 in Europe, he only had his 3000 career in Japan, whereas Max Papis has raced here in 3000, he was here last year. So Mika Salo coming up, oh, and there's problems, a car that is Delatraz stopped in a very unfortunate part of the circuit. Drivers blind as they exit that revised part of the Estoril circuit. So for Mika Salo, coming up to the completion of his first timed lap, through that long corner down onto the fastest part of the circuit, going across start-finish line at about 285 to 90 kilometers per hour. And there Delatraz finally makes his way away from danger back to the pits.
Well, Mika Salo has been confirmed as the Tyrrell driver, as one Tyrrell driver for next year. So he'll be staying with Tyrrell Yamaha for 1996. No word as yet on the second driver at Tyrrell. Ken Tyrrell himself was quoted as saying they'd be keen to see Ukio Katayama back in the team next year, but nothing else has actually been established yet. But Mika Salo will be with the team.
And Mika Salo, you could see, getting the back end of his Tyrrell Yamaha to step out. And here in Estoril, the essence is about downforce. You've got to get as much downforce as you can afford to carry around about 90% of the circuit. That final 10%, in fact, is the pit straight, and that is also the most crucial part of the circuit, especially for the race. Again, you can see how using power to help tighten the exit of that corner, but really that's time lost. The rear end grip not being there is shaving or adding, in fact, tenths of seconds to this time. And again, look, turning in through the right into that SS, the back end getting away. So the rear tire performance on the Tyrrell Yamaha Mika Salo clearly deteriorating more quickly than that of the front.
Well, it doesn't look as though he's going to be able to beat the time of Massimiliano Papis. Let's just see, 25.887, quite close, but no, 26.365. So Mika Salo goes second fastest at the moment. And of course, we haven't seen any of the front runners out onto the circuit yet. But Salo obviously struggling with rear end grip, and he's going to be coming back into the pits, I should think, to try and tune some of that out of the car.
Well, I think he needs to get back into the pits and have a really good talk to the team, because in effect what's happened is one set of tyres for this qualifying session has seen the best, so he's got as many other sets out of the 7 he chooses to run. But if you've got a car that isn't handling particularly well, why waste more tyres? Go in, try and make an adjustment to the car, go back out on that first set of tyres and see whether you've succeeded in improving the car. then put a fresh set of tyres on and try and extract the maximum from that new set.
The local hero, Pedro Lamy, in the Minardi Ford. This will be his second Grand Prix here. He raced here in 1993 when he was driving for Lotus. Didn't race last year, of course, when he was still recovering from the injuries he sustained in testing. But this is going to be a big weekend for the youngster, and he's going to have a lot of media attention on him as he tries to get as good a result as possible. Minardi had a hard time last time out in Monza.
Well, the first of the true front-runners out, Damon Hill, and this time will be watched with considerable interest. Certainly with the Benetton and McLaren teams, and of course Ferrari, Gerhard Berger and Jean Alesi, they were 5th and 6th quickest, and they've also got a modification, or probably a lot of little modifications. The principal one, of course, is around the front of the car. They've got a new front wing available, giving a little bit more downforce without any additional drag, just what you need in Estoril.
Indeed, Damon Hill out, as we often see, one of the first of the front runners to come out onto the circuit with that heavily revised Williams. But Pedro Lamy being concentrated on at the moment, that's fair enough. Hill is just going out to get up to speed first of all, so he won't be on a quick lap as yet, whereas Pedro Lamy is definitely on a fast lap at the moment. Pedro set the 19th fastest time this morning, just a fraction ahead of his teammate Luca Badoa.
A track that Pedro Lamy, of course, knows very well. He was a sensation here back in the early 90s in Vauxhall Lotus, and that is a performance that really brought him to England to take part in the British and the European series, and then graduated his way through Formula 3 and into 3000 into Formula 1. But that testing shunt last year in May at Silverstone was just massive, and I mean, to see him as fit and strong and virtually unaffected by that accident, and able to drive and match, in fact, and be beating his more experienced teammate in the Minardi team, I think is an outstanding performance.
So Pedro Lamy goes fourth fastest. Taki Inoue, believe it or not, has actually gone fastest. It's Inoue ahead of Papis, so the two footwork hearts are separated by 19 thousandths of a second.
And just to give an indication of the difference in times between morning and now in qualification, Taki Inoue is over 2 seconds faster than he achieved this morning. Now, he had 20 laps out of the 23, he's plenty of running. So the footwork team have used that time very effectively. They've found time, and the advantage of that fresh set of tyres has resulted in the young Japanese driver and his teammate being top of the times.
An interesting situation. There's Michael Schumacher in the pits, obviously quite relaxed, not worrying about getting in the car yet. Wasn't too delighted with the performance, the handling of his car this morning, and particularly with the handling over the bumps here.
Well, Benetton, of course, had a large test session last week in Spain, in Barcelona, and Michael Schumacher was testing a variety of modifications. The most notable was a change in the front suspension, what they've been having to do in some race tracks to try and maintain a consistency with the front of the car was running very stiff. On a track like Estoril, that's a big disadvantage. So they're using mechanical means to gain performance, but they need performance. Damon Hill already almost 2 seconds faster than Taki Inoue, and that time Damon Hill, well, it's about 8/10 slower than he did this morning. We wait to see if Damon can find improvement and go against what Goodyear is predicting as being the best time will come on your first flying lap.
So this Williams with its very revised rear end, and yet it's really quite hard to point out to you watching on screen the differences. Quite difficult to see. There's some differences to rear bodywork, rear suspension.
Yeah, the principal change comes around the rear gearbox. A new gearbox casting, almost 3/10 quicker again, so further improvement on this second time lap for Damon Hill. Rear suspension, they had in 94 and the early part of 95, very aerodynamic suspension parts, but they used to put very high loads, and the team have decided that with regulation changes and a variety of other information from wind tunnel, they've altered the rear suspension. They've taken the opportunity to introduce a new gearbox casing, and Damon Hill has lost a lot of time. Poor exit out of that S's. So, a big improvement in lap time at Silverstone last week for the team and for Damon Hill, and they're looking to consolidate that performance here this weekend, get the two cars on the front row of the grid and really try and reopen this championship battle between him and the current championship leader, Michael Schumacher.
Across the line, Damon Hill improves on that lap. Just 2/10 of a second faster than his previous. Ukyo Katayama, by the way, has come up into second position now in the Tyrrell. Taki Inoue third, Max Papis fourth, then Mika Salo and Pedro Lamy. But we're still to see any of the other front runners come out onto the track. And we'll just run through the classification quickly. You can see the big advantage that Damon has so far. But it's going to be a critical qualifying session for him. He said yesterday that the championship really is at a crossroads here.
Yes, it is. It's crucial. Damon Hill must score 10 points. If Michael Schumacher were to be the winner and Damon lose, let's say finish second and lose a further 4 points, that would mean the advantage that Schumacher has going into the Nürburgring to the European Grand Prix would be 19 points with only 40 points to play with. So then the situation would become very, very crucial indeed.
So Hill, is he going to see if he can further improve on this lap? I somewhat doubt it, because the first sector time was around about 7/10 of a second slower.
And again, look, you see Damon Hill, the rear tyre now is the tyre that's taking the punishment. You can see the difficulty. You can even hear it as he plays with the throttle, trying to get grip, trying to get traction, and that loses time.
So Damon Hill exits, but he does, yes, come into the pits. He's decided to end that run, so he's completed his first run. It's Damon Hill fastest from Ukyo Katayama and Taki Inoue at this early stage.
Eurostar. Du centre de Paris au centre de Londres en 3 heures. Paris-Londres d'un seul trait. Enfin.
Et jusqu'au 10 décembre, Paris-Londres, c'est pour tous 594 francs seulement, aller-retour.
En Eurostar, évidemment.
The McLaren, he's around 3/4 of the way round the circuit at the moment. He was a 1/10 of a second slower at the first split than Damon Hill. He's 2/10 down at the second split, but nonetheless, a very competitive performance as he now exits the final corner, and it should put him in fairly close to Damon Hill, going for second place at the moment.
Well, Mika Häkkinen looked very serious indeed, and this is his first flying lap, aggressive. There he's picked up time coming around that long parabolic corner. So Mika Häkkinen confirming himself second quickest. And in fact, he was the quickest so far on the final segment through the parabolica and across the start-finish line. So Mika Häkkinen used his tyres very effectively, and particularly in that last little part of the track.
You can see that Johnny Herbert has just put in a quick lap himself. He's just gone third fastest with the fastest time in the mid-sector. So it's interesting, different cars setting fastest times on different parts of the circuit. Katayama's back down to fourth, then Taki Inoue and Max Papis. And Mark Blundell has come out onto the circuit as well now. So we've got both McLarens out there.
Also, out of interest for all the fans of Jean-Christophe Pouillon, while we were in the commercial break, we did see Pouillon off at the side of the track and out of his car. So, Mika Häkkinen, really, what are you doing? I mean, a wonderful display and lots of rubber left on the track. And again, we're seeing in this qualifying session something slightly different to what we saw initially when the track was that much dirtier. It's the back end of the car that is causing the greater problem for drivers this afternoon.
Indeed, we saw it early on with Mika Salo in this session, and it seems to be apparent with all of the cars.
Well, Mika Häkkinen comes across the line for the second flying time, and that time significantly slower than he achieved. There's Johnny Herbert in his second flying lap. Herbert again slower by half a second. So confirmation, I believe, from what Goodyear told us before we went on air, that really, if you're going to do it, you've got to make sure you do it on your first flying lap.
So we've got to keep our eyes focused for those who are going out onto the circuit and try and see who's setting quick times. Johnny Herbert then third fastest at the moment. It's still Damon Hill with the fastest time so far.
Mark Blundell in the second of the two McLaren Mercedes-Benz with a brief session this morning. He didn't get out in the first part of the 45-minute session because there was a big gear ratio reshuffle. Mark Blundell, also, as we mentioned, newly married, up to fourth place. So the C-Spec MP410 appears to be evolving in the way the team had hoped. They didn't really get the kind of running they wanted before they left. These two cars were flown out on Wednesday straight into Estoril. Most teams bring their cars down by transporter, but McLaren, they were so committed to getting this new setup prepared they actually flew their cars down.
So Johnny Herbert comes round. Looks as though he may try and get one more lap out of these tyres. He's done 3 laps so far. The winner from Monza, of course, winner of 2 Grand Prix now in this year's World Championship. It's moved him up into 3rd place in the championship on 38 points, but he's actually decided to finish this run. He's coming back into the pits as well. So Hill, Hakkinen, Herbert, the 3 H's at the moment, are leading the field. Mark Blundell in 4th, then Ukyo Katayama and Taki Inoue. But we're still waiting for Michael Schumacher to come out onto the circuit. David Coulthard, however, has just come out, as has Martin Brundle.
So all of a sudden, the track virtually empty. Coulthard out on the track, but we have yet to get sight of the Scot, who, of course, right now is a great centre of attention in relation to his plans for 1996. But in a very traditional Scottish manner, he's staying mum about his plans.
Indeed, those plans seem to circulate around the Ferrari or McLaren teams, but everybody in Formula One really at the moment waiting for the decision of Alain Prost, who tested again for McLaren last week. Is he going to race or not?
Well, I have to say, after that test, and in particular with the performance on the same day from Damon Hill in the sister car to that of David Coulthard here on screen, I'm beginning to get a feeling that maybe Alain Prost, his position and his point of view about racing maybe has changed slightly. But that's a decision that we will have to wait until Nürburgring, because the Marlboro McLaren Mercedes-Benz team are announcing their driver lineup for 96 at the Nürburgring, and it's only a few days away.
Does that mean, John, you think he's going to drive or not? Or race, I should say.
Well, driving is one thing, racing is a different thing. I'm sure that Alain Prost's contribution to the team is extremely valuable, and in fact, Mario Illman, who makes the Mercedes-Benz engine, certainly feels it's valuable. David Coulthard, only 31 hundredths away from teammate Damon Hill. Can he pick up that little bit of extra time on the exit of Parabolica? Now down across start-finish straight at 295 kilometers per hour. Now!
Across the line he goes, and he's 45 thousandths of a second slower than Damon Hill on his first flying lap. Good effort from David Coulthard, who didn't do as many laps this morning because of that hydraulic problem, but he goes second fastest. Remember, he finished second here last year. The Williams Renaults enjoyed a 1-2. That was the second race that Michael Schumacher had to sit out, of course, but it was an excellent result for the team, and Coulthard will feel very confident here.
Not on camera, but another man feeling quite confident is Martin Brundle. Now he's suddenly jumped up into 4th place, and his best time, 1 minute 24.351. So that Ligier Mugen Honda engine package looking quite good. They were confident about coming here. They say it isn't an out-and-out power circuit, so they feel that that Mugen Honda engine is very ideally suited.
Coulthard, as you could see then, was still just a fraction slower than Hill at the second checkpoint, but there's no doubt he could make that up. Here we are through this very, very tight sequence of corners. They've renamed it to Tanker Corner as far as we can work out.
Well, he's just backed off. He's not, well, I thought he had backed off. He's certainly had trouble getting traction as he exited the uphill, and he's over 2/10. So much from my point of view, he must have just used the feel of his backside, literally, to gauge how much grip he had, and he's already 2/10, but he's got to carry it through this final corner and down across the line. Can he do it?
Yes, he can. The answer, David Coulthard goes fastest by 0.2 of a second from teammate Damon Hill, and the new Williams Renault, the revised car with this new back end, seems to be working well, but we're still awaiting Michael Schumacher and his first laps in this session. Jean Alesi has just confounded everybody by going fastest here at Estoril. He's taken the provisional pole by just, well, no, he hasn't, because Gerhard Berger, as I speak, has just gone to the top of the list himself. The 2 Ferraris, from not looking so quick this morning, are suddenly putting in some superb time.
And I think part of the reason that we're seeing this very powerful performance from Ferrari right now in qualifying, as opposed to what we had in this morning's free practice, is that Ferrari traditionally is it uses its tires more aggressively. Williams, Benetton, they tend to be a little easier on their tire, which is good in a race, but in conditions like this, Ferrari may well have that advantage, and if they can sustain an advantage throughout the remaining part of this qualifying, and even possibly into Saturday's qualifying, well, that's really going to create a situation that Williams and Benetton are not going to be very happy about.
No, I should think that they're somewhat surprised watching this on the monitors at the moment. Can Jean Alesi further improve the time? No, he can't. So it'll be interesting to see whether Gerhard Berger, who has actually just established a new fastest sector time on the first part, he's still on a flying lap, Gerhard Berger. Jean Alesi, you can see there, has decided to back off. But whether Berger can actually improve on this second lap, or whether they're only going to get one lap in.
Well, we'd love to see Gerhard Berger. He's quickest through the first segment, quickest through the second segment, and here we are watching Jean Alesi crawling back there. Finally we see Gerhard Berger. Can he make it in the third segment? 91 hundredths of a second away from his provisional, but he was up on time on the first two segments. Again, an indication as to what happens on the second lap in that long parabolic corner. Further down the field, Mika Häkkinen still fifth, Eddie Irvine up to sixth, Barrichello in the second of the Jordan Peugeots, seventh, Brundle down to eighth, Herbert ninth, and Heinz Harold Frentzen up to 10th.
You notice there, the keen-eyed amongst you, that Gerhard Berger looks slightly different sitting in the cockpit today. He's got a different crash helmet for the weekend, and that is as a result of Ferrari inviting an Italian newspaper to run a competition to come up with a helmet design that Gerhard Berger would use, and the winning design is what Gerhard Berger is wearing on this weekend, and the winner is actually here as a guest of Ferrari.
And I'm quite certain if Gerhard Berger wins on Sunday, he'll keep that helmet design for the rest of the year. You've got to go with every little bit of luck, whatever. So let's watch Berger out of that very, very tricky, tight left-right. You can see the back end again breaks away. Gerhard Berger maintains, I would say, the nicest exit we've seen so far of anybody at that section of circuit. And again into this long corner, heavily loads up the left-hand side of the car. The grip goes away. You've got to back off. In fact, he's just coming so far off the throttle, he's going into the pits.
So Gerhard Berger decides to end his run there, but an impressive performance. He took pole position here last year, and so far it looks as though he may well be able to back up that sort of performance. Berger ahead of Alesi, then Coulthard and Hill, the two Williams just separated by a fraction, and then Mika Häkkinen and Eddie Irvine.
And Damon Hill back out onto the circuit. As we see, Olivier Panis, he's up to 11th place. And looking further down the field, well, there is Michael Schumacher. This is the man the camera will remain on. His first flying lap, and crucial to see that first segment time. That's the easiest segment time to improve upon on. That's when your tyre is at its peak in terms of freshness. And Schumacher very, very determined to see an end to this championship battle. Beautiful exits. Look at that four-wheel slide. Just the last part of that corner. Now on to the second quickest part of the circuit. Good exit again. Down through the flat-out right, up to the second. For the first segment, split time over a tenth of a second quicker than Gerhard Berger. Now the technical part of the circuit, very difficult indeed here. Always a battle between front-end grip and rear end. And as you progress the lap, the car, the grip just ebbs away all the time. And of course, coming into this, the new part of the circuit, introduced in '94, Roberto Moreno intelligently stays way out of the way. Now let's watch Schumacher's exit. Again, fighting for rear-end grip, but good exit.
The second split coming up, and
almost a second faster than Gerhard Berger. That's a monster improvement from the German driver. Again, now over the curb, down on the straight. Can he maintain that performance? Will he improve by 9/10? He has done it, 21.885. That is unbelievable. Contrast that with pole position last year from Gerhard Berger, just over a second slower.
But interestingly, John, Damon Hill's just come back out onto the circuit. He's on a flying lap, and his first sector time is better than Michael Schumacher has just done.
But this, oh, Michael Schumacher, too much throttle, Michael. Contain yourself. You've got a 9/10 of a second advantage. Don't stick it in the barrier at this stage of the event.
There is, we're on board with Damon Hill. Let's see what this time is as he crosses the line. A 1:22.024, just a tenth of a second slower than Michael Schumacher.
But I was going to say that Damon Hill is on his second run. He's got the advantage. He's got the knowledge of knowing what track conditions are like. Michael Schumacher was on his first run. So again, the advantage still, in my view, lies with the German. But Damon Hill generally is quicker on his second lap. It's a nature of the driver, a function of how they prefer to approach qualifying. So let's see if Damon Hill can find that 0.139 of a second. In fact, let's make it 0.140. And he's found over that.
certainly on the first bit, it's looking good for him. Over a tenth of a second faster through the uphill left-hander. Now they start to come back downhill. There's a lot of elevation change here at Estoril, part of the challenge. But now they're coming to this very tricky part. It's not a popular part of the circuit. It's all about patience as they try and squeeze on the power here.
Just watch how Damon Hill tries, fights to get the grip. The rear wheels are always trying to get away, and I mentioned the driver's backside. Well, that's the first part of your anatomy that tells you the back end of the car is going away, and the time is drifting away as well. Damon Hill, over a tenth of a second down on Michael Schumacher, and again on the exit of this corner, you just pray for the grip. You know it's just evaporating.
Across the line, I don't think it's going to be enough to take pole. No, it's not. It's very, very even with what he did on his last lap. He did a 22.024 on the last lap and a 22.052 this time around.
Well, something, Ben, pretty clear to me that Michael Schumacher wants this year's championship. Damon Hill wants it, and they are going to fight. I don't know how hard, but I tell you what, if it comes to a race between these two, I just do hope that the race isn't spoiled by those incidents that we've seen in previous events, and we have a clean battle. But it's going to be a battle for the championship, and let's hope it goes down to the wire.
So, Michael Schumacher fastest at the moment as we are working our way through this session. We've got just over 24 minutes to go. Damon Hill second, Gerhard Berger then third, with Jean Alesi fourth. David Coulthard fifth fastest, then Mika Häkkinen from Eddie Irvine and Rubens Barrichello, then Heinz-Harald Frentzen and Martin Brundle. I think everybody has been out. Now, we're missing one driver. Remember, Bouillon had stopped earlier on, and Montermini hasn't been out onto the circuit, but apart from that, we've seen everybody.
Oh, Michael Schumacher, ever so lucky. We've seen in the past when the Benetton does that, it snaps back viciously the other way and usually ends up in a barrier or a concrete wall. This time Schumacher got it under control and lives to fight for the remaining part into the second half of this session.
On board with his teammate now, Johnny Herbert, who's down in 11th place as we speak, but he's obviously on a fast lap now. Can he get any closer to the time of Michael Schumacher? The first check is coming up as they go through this sweeping corner. That's taken flat out, no braking for that one. And then just before they go on the brakes fairly hard here, we get our first indicator. Well, he went on the brakes a little too hard, locking up that left front.
Again, listen to Johnny Herbert, short shifting between third and fourth gear on the exit of that interior parabolica. And that is an indication to me that he is not happy with his car setup. It normally indicates a car that's got a back end that will not stick when you need it. And short shift is often the answer.
Johnny Herbert had his final race for Lotus here last year, his last Grand Prix with the team before he switched to Ligier at the end of last season, if you remember.
Oh, went all over the place. Missed the apex of the corner. We don't know why. Maybe he's just going to come into the pitch. Yes, he's backed off. That lap unsatisfactory. Well, he's not. He's suddenly gone on. I thought the way he backed off, he's got to come in, but maybe he just decided to control the situation, get back onto the throttle, try again. Over 3 seconds slower on that lap. That was the result of what we saw. So he abandoned the lap just at the entry to the fast corner. He then picked up the throttle again and starts once again to try and find this is 8th flying lap. Running out of time.
He is indeed, and he's 2.5 seconds away from pole position of Michael Schumacher at the moment. So some way off, and he's really got to try and find some pace now. Perhaps he's set himself up well at the start of this lap to try and further improve. Mika Häkkinen's on the circuit as well. There he is, in fact. Häkkinen, 5th fastest, and he has fractionally improved his time. In fact, he's gone ahead of Coulthard now, Häkkinen.
And Mika Häkkinen, I think there's no driver does more miles in a car than the Finn. And he left the car at Silverstone on Tuesday evening at just after 5 o'clock. Has given 5 additional laps on the Grand Prix circuit just to give the team the opportunity to confirm that this C-spec is the way to go. They got that confirmation, and they're looking for more improvement.
Been quite a key circuit, this one, in the history of Mika Häkkinen, if you like. Remember 2 years ago when he took over the McLaren seat from Michael Andretti, went back to the United States, and Mika Häkkinen out-qualifying Ayrton Senna on that occasion and causing many people to sit up and take notice after he'd been spending the whole year basically just doing the testing.
And certainly I think it did catch the attention of Ayrton Senna, but come the race, situation reverted to the status quo that Senna really was outstanding. Mika Häkkinen's race sadly ended on the exit of the long parabolica. He let the car run too wide, as we remember, and got off track in bits and pieces. As the result of that came off the car, he had a fairly heavy shunt, and but it was a performance that really signalled to McLaren this is a guy that they want in their race team, and they still believe emphatically that the potential that Häkkinen has never yet been fully realised.
So Schumacher fastest from Damon Hill and Gerhard Berger. Barrichello is 7th fastest at the moment. He has just fractionally improved his time, gone ahead of teammate Eddie Irvine. But Michael Schumacher still fastest in this session, and it's only taken him 3 laps to do that. Damon Hill 2nd fastest, but he's done 8 laps. Gerhard Berger 3rd, Jean Alesi 4th, then Mika Häkkinen, David Coulthard, and then Rubens Barrichello, who decides to come into the pits.
And Rubens Barrichello, also a driver who didn't get the maximum number of laps this morning. He would have liked, because Barrichello had an engine problem again. Peugeot's V10 engine not being as consistent as the team certainly needs, the driver needs, to be able to get out, do the work with the car, and therefore find improvement. But Michael Schumacher, once again, so dominant, only 3 flying laps. In fact, 2 flying laps came straight in. At Gerhard Berger, the man who had that provisional pole, again now on course. Can Berger once again make an improvement? Well, we're going to have to wait and see, because he's about to start a flying lap this on his 2nd set of brand new Goodyear B compound tires. And just look how sharp the turn in with the Ferrari was, and that lovely, glorious 4th gear right-hander at the end of pit straight.
Then into the slow section, lots of hairpins here. This one of the tight ones, and again you can just see the front wheels correcting the slide, but beautifully done.
Really a lovely balance. The footwork, the way Berger can balance a car. If you remember back to Monte Carlo, he gave us pure joy in his path through the Casino Square. Well, Gerhard, the most experienced, and look, 4200s quicker than Michael Schumacher now. That's at the first intermediate point. Look, again, you see the car slides on the exit. That's a combination of the steering and the power. So Gerhard Berger has the finest of fine balances in the Ferrari on this run.
So we've got the last third of the circuit to complete. Coming out into heavy braking, locks the left front, but not too much to really lose in time.
But real difficulty. Everybody's finding it hard to get grip, hard to get traction, and he's lost. Look at that, almost 0.3 of a second in that intermediate part of the circuit, the part of the circuit which I call the most technical bit. But he may pick up a little bit of that as he exits onto the straight, but probably that's too much to make up.
So 21.885 to target, 22.281. So he goes 3rd behind Schumacher and Hill. And the gap between him and Hill is only 0.2 of a second, but obviously a little bit more to Michael Schumacher. Nonetheless, Gerhard Berger perhaps will try and squeeze another lap out of these tyres. We haven't really seen anyone do that successfully, and there already you can begin to see there's more sliding going on.
Indeed, and that's the danger of not getting it right on that one out lap. You've just got to judge it to perfection. We're almost back in a situation which a number of these drivers competing this weekend are unfamiliar with. That's what we had in qualifying. You see in the first segment they're over 0.2 of a second away from Michael Schumacher, and I think he's just realised that it's not worth it. He can go back into the pits, he can take the option of waiting it out until the end and maybe mixing and matching his 1st and 2nd set of tyres. Take a chance and run a 3rd. Well, maybe the better gamble is to wait until Saturday's qualifying and believe that the track, and especially around this part of the track, may have more inherent grip by having more rubber down. Well, there's plenty of rubber down from that little episode of exuberance of the right foot. And so we don't know whether Berger will continue or mixing and matching, or just simply decide, well, I think I'll wait until Saturday afternoon, hope to get a clear lap. But going back to the concept of what we have here, this is just like the old days when we had qualifying tyres. Great to comment on, because you knew precisely that when you got a driver on a lap, it was really going to be just one shot.
Gerhard Berger back into the pits then, with Schumacher and Hill just ahead of him, but Eddie Irvine has just moved up to 4th position.
And Eddie Irvine, fine performance. And there's the sound of Berger's engine shutting up, and so abrupt. But Irvine, in the second of the two Jordan Peugeots, up onto the second row of the grid, splits the two Ferraris.
So, interesting to see the performance of the Jordan Peugeot as we go back on board with a Ferrari. This time it's Jean Alesi. He's down in 5th position, and he's just a tenth of a second less than that slower than Eddie Irvine. And it looks as though Alesi could improve at least on his 5th fastest time on this lap. He's not going to challenge Schumacher for provisional pole, but I think we will see an improvement from Alesi. Now, is he going to move up onto the second row, or will he get onto the front row? Second row it is. He only moves up 1 place, and still 9/10 off Schumacher.
But David Coulthard has gone quickest. Coulthard just behind Jean Alesi. 1 minute 21.465. Almost half a second faster than Michael Schumacher. And the young Scot continuing what we have seen him do in Belgium, in Monza, and here now in Estoril. Well, Damon Hill, Michael Schumacher, the challenge is now thrown down. And Damon Hill over half a second slower than the young Scot. Michael Schumacher just under half a second slower. And this is brewing up beautifully in the closing 12 minutes.
Good performance once again from Coulthard then. Now, is he going to be able to get a second lap out of these tyres? It doesn't look too likely. We're just checking the split times, and he was a fair bit slower on that first one, about 3/4 of a second. But a superb effort from Coulthard. And, well, he's been pretty busy between Monza and this race. A lot of promotional duties, off to Greece last weekend, all sorts of dashing around the world. And he's suffering a bit from a cold, but it doesn't seem to be slowing him down much. Fastest at the moment by 4/10 of a second.
And all that bearing in mind the troubled session he had this morning when he only had 7 laps with an hydraulic failure, a familiar fault or problem that David Coulthard suffered from throughout the year. But when it's right, there is the evidence of the potential of this young man, David Coulthard. 0.420 faster than the reigning world champion and current championship leader, Michael Schumacher.
And indeed, with several laps still remaining, he's done 7 laps, he's still got another run to go. So has Damon Hill. Schumacher potentially has 2 runs to go, but you're on board with the world championship leader, and he's about to go on to a quick lap.
No, he's about to come back into the pits because his lap, in fact, was 122.518. Now, I think that Schumacher went out on his original first set of tyres, tried a change, has dived straight back into the pits. He will now, in my view, put on a new set of tyres and try to wrestle that provisional pole back from David Coulthard into the arms of Michael Schumacher.
So we wait to see with interest. There is Andrea Montermini. He's finally got out onto the circuit. It's been a long wait for him, and obviously been some problems. He's only done 1 lap so far, but Montermini finally getting out there. You can see he's sliding that car around quite considerably as well, and hoping for more luck than he had last time out in Monza. Remember, he got wrapped up in that first lap accident and wasn't able to take the restart, so he'll be hoping for better fortunes here.
Well, David Coulthard taking provisional pole, and Jean Alesi now up to 5th place. That's put Eddie Irvine, who had been 4th only moments ago, down into 6th place. But Irvine, like the majority of the runners, have got laps remaining, and it's simply a question, are they going to use a 3rd set of tyres today, or are they going to take the gamble and try and run them all on Saturday, when, in the consensus view, the circuit ought to be quicker?
Montermini exits the S's, now around this long right-hander. It's difficult with this picture, this shot, to really see how long this corner is. It just goes on and on and on at very high speed. Eventually they come out onto start-finish, and Montermini is obviously going to improve because he hasn't established a time yet. He goes 20th. So he just displaces Roberto Moreno and is just behind Pedro Lamy at the moment. Minardi's quite a long way down today. Interesting to see that, and certainly the Tyrrell's a little further up than we've seen them the last couple of times, with Ukio Katayama and Mika Salo running 14th and 15th. Let's just quickly remind you on the top 10. It's Coulthard ahead of Schumacher, Hill, and Gerhard Berger, Jean Alesi, Eddie Irvine, Mika Hakkinen 7th, Heinz-Harald Frentzen 8th, Rubens Barrichello 9th, and Martin Brundle is in 10th place, still with 1 run to go.
If we look right at the back of the grid, we've got a situation which probably we will not see next year, because with the 107% rule to be introduced in '96, people like Jean-Denis Delatrace, who's in his first Grand Prix for Pacific, he's over 12 seconds slower than David Coulthard's provisional pole. If you're talking about Formula One and Grand Prix racing, it is unacceptable to have a 12-second differential between the front and the back. That's why 107% is going to be introduced. It's sad for those teams at the back. They do try hard, but such is the competition at the front, such is the nature of Formula One, where success provides funding to provide success, that those at the back have almost got an impossible task. Next year, I don't know whether we will see the teams that have supported Formula One over many years. They're not as competitive, but they may not have the opportunity even to race.
Well, watching Pedro Lamy once again. One thing, John, we should mention that Formula fans may well be interested in was a letter that was published, well, it hasn't been published at all, but made some accusations. A letter that was sent to some newspapers, also to some teams as well. And we have some news because the FIA have responded to that today.
Yes, their investigations have got, they say, conclusive evidence that this anonymous letter concerning the Benetton team sent to a number of teams and the FIA was a hoax. That is the judgment of the FIA, and it was a brief note this morning in the press room, so they've laid that ghost to bed. But we just wonder, the writer of that hoax letter, I hope he's not a Eurosport viewer. If he is, would he like to make himself known to us or to anybody in Formula One?
Well, indeed, the letter certainly calling into disrepute the team, and the FIA having acted very quickly to show that their feeling is that there's nothing genuine in it whatsoever. So Pedro Lamy, as you can see, he's still 19th fastest, and the Minardi seems to be struggling here a little bit. Obviously not enjoying the sort of power of the top teams. They're running the Ford ED customer engine and perhaps suffering a little bit here at Estoril.
But Minardi, more or less since the middle of the year, have gone to great lengths to point out that their chassis is the equal of any out there, and on the parts of the circuit where chassis performance is the criteria, they've said our car's as good as a Ferrari, as good as anybody else. The problem is that the Ford ED engine, the customer engine that Ford make available to the smaller teams, just hasn't got what it takes to compete with the factory units from Ford themselves, from Renault, from Peugeot, from Ferrari, from Lee, from the Mugen Honda, whatever. So I'm sure we'll have in the press releases that teams put out after qualifying further confirmation that this Minardi chassis is a real dream of a car. It's just they don't have the horsepower.
Well, they may consider that, but at the end of the day, it's a pretty tight and twisty circuit, this one, that should demand a good chassis.
Yes, it does. Damon Hill back out onto the circuit, and this will be his last run, and a vital run. He's had 2 goes now. He ought to know how the tyre will perform on this first flying lap, and that's the lap he really has to focus and concentrate on, because that's going to give him the best chance to get back onto the front row, maybe even once again secure provisional pole.
Close-up view of that new helmet design just for this weekend. As you remember, most of the flags of the different countries. That's basically how that design has been made up.
I must say, I do prefer Gerhard Berger's familiar helmet colours. The new helmet design, the winner of this award, to me looks very messy indeed. And I think initially when Berger ran this morning with the helmet on, we thought, what is going on? Who's driving this car? It was Gerhard Berger.
It was indeed, just in disguise. Johnny Herbert then is back out. He's trying to improve on his 11th place, and there you can see him sliding out of the first hairpin. He's got a lot of work to do. He's somewhere like 2.9 seconds off provisional pole at the moment, and he will not be at all amused about that. So this really is a big effort from Johnny Herbert you're watching now. It could well be his last chance to move up into, for example, the top 6.
Well, over a second at that first intermediate, a second in a 34-second span, an awful lot of time to lose. Again, that's just confirmation that Johnny Herbert is not happy with the way his Benetton Renault handles around Estoril. And if a driver is not happy, therefore he's not confident. If he's not confident, he won't open the throttle, and therefore, once again, times will not be there.
A little lock-up once again, and again you can see how much he's fighting the car, steering and throttle all working in sympathy to try and get out of that corner. But 1.6 seconds down, that's not going to be enough to get into the top 6.
But it will be an improvement, because overall he was 2.9 seconds down, so we have to see on that final corner, as we look at Damon Hill coming up to complete his 10th flying lap.
And is it going to be an improvement?
He has. Damon Hill has bumped teammate David Coulthard off that provisional pole. He has now done what he had to do. He has done it on his first flying lap, and traditionally Damon Hill is quicker on his second lap. So Damon Hill, there you see the time on screen. He will know that the team will be giving him information as to how much time remains in this session. He will get that on a pit board as he goes past the pits. He may have it by the team talking to him. He will have one more lap, and if he wants to go for yet another, it'll be there, the time is available. I think Damon Hill will be very happy with his improvement. He's 0.143 quicker than Coulthard. More importantly, Schumacher, who is out on the track, is on the second row.
So Damon Hill takes the provisional pole, but that could be his last chance unless he gets a good lap out of this second lap on these tyres. Then that could be his final chance.
But David Coulthard, who's also on the track, has gone quickest in the second segment. So as soon as David Hill has knocked Coulthard off pole, Coulthard is back on the circuit, trying to wrestle it away again.
Well, David Coulthard's lap's just been completed. It is an improvement, but not enough to beat Damon Hill. So Damon Hill and David Coulthard in a tremendous battle here. And indeed, Damon Hill's coming back into the pits. He feels he's not going to get any more advantage out of those tyres. Coulthard has done one lap on his set of tyres that he's on at the moment, and he's just 1/10 of a second slower than Damon Hill. So next we await Michael Schumacher, really, to find out what he can do. But we're on board with Coulthard.
Yes, traffic ahead, and he's going to be concerned because he's not close enough to get under that car under braking into the interior parabolica. So David Coulthard will rely upon the generosity from, I think that's a minority ahead. So can he make up that time, or is it all going to be too late? And again, the worst part of the circuit to come up against that minority, under braking into, oh dear me, and Luca Bador realizes too late that the Scot was there, so time lost. There's the time remaining, just over a minute, 1.3 seconds down. But Coulthard has one more lap. He will come across the start-finish line, plenty of time. But will there be energy? Will there be life in the tyres? I doubt it very much, because he's coming into the pits.
We have just about a minute to go. Michael Schumacher is on the circuit. He's just gone out, or just gone round. He's completed his outlap. He's just gone through the first sector, and his first sector time is 1/10 slower than Damon Hill's. And you're on board now with Schumacher. Can he improve? He's got both Coulthard and Hill to beat now, because they've taken the front row, and this could be the last chance for Schumacher to get himself on the front row, and Gerhard Berger's right in front of him.
Yes, the Ferrari comes into play, and that is about the end of the day for Michael Schumacher. He could not find his way past the Ferrari. Gerhard Berger and Jean Alesi both on the track, and there you see Schumacher frustrated, but he may just wait, let that Ferrari get away and start again. Can he get across the start-finish line before the flag comes out? He's going to make it by the skin of his teeth, and I think Martin Brundle does as well.
They both make it by about 15 seconds, in fact, as the countdown continues. You can see it on your screen now. And this really is the last chance for Michael Schumacher to get back on the front row in this first qualifying session. Of course, there's another session to come tomorrow, but always you've got to attack each session as if it could be the only one. And now we shall get a chance to see. So, in fact, the red flag has just been brought out by the looks of things. So we don't quite know why, but we're getting news that the red flag has been brought out. So we'll try and let you know what's going on there. But for the moment, Schumacher is still charging on this lap.
And there the difference, over 1/10 of a second down. So Michael Schumacher on his last lap, that is for sure, because the checkered flag is out. And he will complete this lap. He's one of the two cars that got past before the flag came out. Martin Brundle in the Ligier was the second of those two cars. So Schumacher, a lot of work to do. And there, look at his hands, a blur. He went left hand down to check the wayward tail of the Benetton Renault. So 7/10 time drifts away by the corner. Michael Schumacher will be on the second row as Saturday dawns. And there the final cars make their way across the line. And it will not be a happy Michael Schumacher. He will have felt that he got it, he timed it wrong, really. He just happened to come out when the Ferrari was at the most crucial point in the circuit. Well, that's how it is in qualifying. That's how it is here in Estoril. Well, Michael Schumacher slowed down as he came alongside the Ferrari. His hand came out of the cockpit. And that's really, I think, part of the reason why Michael Schumacher and Gerhard Berger are not going to be partners of Ferrari. Schumacher disgusted that the Austrian did not give him room. And Gerhard Berger, I'm sure, has got an equally friendly comment or gesture to make to the German. And I would care not to speak it or articulate it here on Eurosport because it's unrepeatable.
I'm sure. Well, there was no red flag at the end. It was just a checkered flag. We were getting some dodgy information coming through there, but nobody going off at the end of that session. In fact, I have to say, it was a very clean session. Same with the free practice this morning. I don't think we've seen any cars actually going off the circuit and certainly not hitting anything today. So that bodes well for the weekend.
Yes, indeed it does. The only car that we have seen off track, and in fact we saw it and the audience didn't, was Jean-Christophe Bouillon. That may just simply have been a mechanical problem. Well, David Coulthard explaining to television how he missed that provisional pole by just over a tenth of a second, but it's in the family. So the two Williams in their FWC form, 17C form, confirming what we saw just over a week ago at Silverstone when Damon Hill blitzed the best time he had ever done at Silverstone in the 95 configuration car.
Damon Hill fastest from David Coulthard, and Michael Schumacher ending up half a second down. But that half a second, John, is a little bit unrepresentative because of that incident that looked as though he got held up at the end of that session, and Schumacher surely would have been in a chance to challenge for pole.
Yes, indeed, and I think just the track got a little bit messy, a bit crowded, and when you're doing a run like that, when you're on a one-lap express, you need every opportunity you can, and of course with Gerhard Berger coming into play in the slowest part of the circuit, that very fiddly. That part of the circuit last year was introduced to slow down a part of the circuit drivers felt was too dangerous. And I just wonder whether they really prefer what they've got as opposed to how the circuit previously was.
Well, they were just looking at the times. Notice again how the two Jordan Peugeots are split by the McLaren Mercedes of Mika Hakkinen in 6th, 7th and 8th. Then Martin Brundle and Olivier Panis, they've got the two Ligiers together, 9th and 10th. Then we're looking further down the list, and most disappointed, surely, is going to be Johnny Herbert, winner of the last Grand Prix, and there he is, way down in 12th position.
I think Johnny Herbert's problems will take second place to those of Michael Schumacher. That's the focus of the team. But, you know, Johnny Herbert's complained, and he was quite audible about it at Monza. He happened to win there, but basically the situation, I think, will be pretty much unchanged.
So some work to do, perhaps, in the Benetton Renault camp tonight. Everybody looking fairly serious down there as they discuss with Michael Schumacher the direction that they need to follow in terms of tuning the car. And, of course, they'll get a chance to try that out in the free practice tomorrow. And then we'll be watching the qualifying. But tonight, of course, Pole Position magazine at 6:30 Central European time, 5:30 in the UK. We'll bring you all the latest news from today's qualifying. And then tomorrow, we've got the second qualifying session live, 1 o'clock, 12 o'clock in the UK. And, of course, on Sunday as ever, it's the warm-up at 9:30 and the Grand Prix at 1:30. But bear in mind, on Sunday, the times will be the same in the UK as they are in Europe. So after this programme, we'll be going truck racing, in fact, with a repeat of Speed World. But from Estoril today, the story is of Williams Renault, their revised car, taking the front two places on the provisional grid.
Indeed, and all I can say is welcome back qualifying tyres, because that's in effect what we have here. Join us for Saturday qualifying. It's going to be fantastic, and who's going to be on pole? Watch.